Welcome to Valley Strange, episode number 11. On this episode, we're going to be starting off with our three-part series of Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet. And this is book one of the Earth Chronicles.
Get ready for some ridiculous shit. Geez.
And I am your host, Ray. And always with me, my co-host.
This is Roland.
And the co-host in the Pacific Northwest Studios.
This is Dan from Mordor, Northwest.
Yes.
It's quite apocalyptic over there.
The Northwest.
Dude, I mean, it just like, there was actually a fucking fire in the town. I was like, I don't know if I bitched about you guys or talked to you guys about this earlier, but
Jesus Christ.
it's like maybe 15 miles away. But they'd evacuate like a bunch of parts of the town, apparently, like, because dust storms and like random fires were just starting. Like, it was fucking stupid. But most of the main action today is just all the smoke from like Oregon, and there are a couple places in Washington that are like completely ablaze. So
yeah,
kind of looks like our apartment in the early 2010s there, guys.
outdoors. Damn. Interesting.
Again, this book is written by Zecharia Sitchin, and he does have a series called The Earth Chronicles, and there are 6 books in total.
I would just like to point out it's Sitchin.
Sitchin, sorry. I've been saying Stitchin for like the longest time.
Yeah, no, dude.
It's Sitchin.
It's like bitchin', but not as cool.
Yeah, and just to give a quick biography about Zecharia Sitchin,
Some background.
is that he was born July 11th, 1920 in Baku, Azerbaijan. I can't
Azerbaijan.
Wait, is that on the main dock
Yeah.
for that? Let me look it up because.
Azerbaijan.
How do you pronounce it?
Oh, wait. Is it? Oh, it's Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan, okay.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, geography. 7th grade.
he died October 9th, 2010 in New York. I didn't quite grasp the specific city that he was in. Said he came from an academic family, and he did receive a graduate degree from the London School of Economics. He was the author of the Earth Chronicles, a series of books, along with many books on the subject published in 20
about
languages.
His background, real quick, his academic background, because like I've seen various places say that he got a degree in like ancient economics, but all of the kind of formal looking sources say it's economics.
And that's one thing I was going to bring up is that there have been a few places I've read that he got a degree in ancient economics. I don't know what the fuck that is necessarily. I've never heard of such a degree. Because
then it'd be like, wouldn't he get like a degree in classics? Because like that's how they divided, like, because there was like social anthropology and then classics where they just lumped archaeology and history and all that sort of shit. If I'm not misremembering the classic bifurcation of at least archaeological and historical branches of thought. Anyway, so yeah, wouldn't he just get a degree in classics? But so if he was in the school of economics, so, I'm not sure the tie over would, or how it would tie over to ancient societies or whatever.
Right. So basically, Zecharia Sitchin took it upon himself to research this topic, and he dedicated his life to proving, quote unquote, that mankind was created from a genetic modification of extraterrestrials known as the Anunnaki. And it says known as one of the few scholars to read and interpret ancient Sumerian and Akkadian tablets, according to his official website. And again, you can go to his website, and he sells his books there. There's a bit of a biography on him, and not much information is provided necessarily. There is a book that I have been reading kind of off and on called Zecharia Sitchin and the Extraterrestrial something. But it's written by someone who has firsthand knowledge of him as a person because they traveled with him, and they had firsthand account of how he was as a person and how he spoke and all those kinds of things, and what he thought from his own mouth about the information that he's presenting. And so again, that's just a very brief background on
If
Zachariah
you want
Sitchin.
more information, there's plenty of references and shit.
There's a
you can find
website.
on-
Go to the fucking website and you can
there's
see
his
that.
website. There's like stuff on Wikipedia. There's
And
fan sites.
I've read places that his books have been either published in either 20 languages or 25 different languages. And so, I mean, he was very popular whenever he came out with this book, The 12th Planet. And he's kind of like, I forgot when this was published, but
1976.
yeah, it was Piggy. This is just an opinion. This is not fact. That he's kind of piggybacking off the Eric von Däniken book, Chariots of the Gods, which Eric von Däniken is trying to show that the ancient cultures have evidence. They show evidence of extraterrestrial beings.
What is it
coming
called
to give them
again?
knowledge.
The unknown hand, or the fuck? It's something along the lines of, because at first he doesn't really outright say it was aliens. It was like
no one ever really says
it was
aliens.
like the benevolent. They imply it, right? And you're meant to infer that obviously they're talking about little green men. But I think I forget. Like it's not necessarily a term, but it's mentioned in a lot of different texts. I think you've told me before, Daniel, and I want to say it's like the benevolent hand of well, that's just what it's called. Like the
maybe something like that. I'm not sure if I ever.
I don't recall
those
like
two terms directly together.
It's in the damn book.
It
Like, he
smacks
mentions
of
it a
some
few
bullshit that I've read and would convey to somebody.
Yeah.
So Sitchin's background, although it was lightly treated, I want to revisit it real quick before we go into this text. As far as like what he said about himself, as far as what he's studied and shit. So I'm going to jump through a couple sentences out of the first page of the prologue called Genesis. So he said, and I'm not even going to read this whole sentence because that was kind of bullshit. The Old Testament has filled my life from childhood. Actually, that's the first sentence. So like the Old Testament, like it's his guiding force essentially, in his life. But next paragraph down, because he talked about how he was studying, the Old Testament, da 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 da. But in the ensuing years,
its original Hebrew,
I have learned the languages and history and archaeology of the ancient Near East.
Yeah, so like he refers to the Middle East as the Near East.
Yeah, the Nephilim became an obsession. Archaeological finds in the deciphering of Sumerian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Hittite, Canaanite, and other ancient texts and epic tales increasingly confirm the accuracy of the biblical references to the kingdoms, cities, rulers, places, temples, trade routes, artifacts, tools, and customs of antiquity. It's just crazy because he doesn't outright say that I know how to read these, but he implies it, which I think is interesting. It's like these texts say it, but I think he does a better job about saying well, these texts do say it, but he does cite Kramer and some of these other scholars on these ancient cultures, and I think he could have done a way better job citing his sources, particularly when it came to the Bible verses that he was apparently drawing from to yap about in his little brain droppings of a book.
Well, one of the things I just wanted to touch on before we actually get into the first 5 chapters, and again, this episode is going to specifically cover as best we can. We'll get into the trials and tribulations about that. Is the first 5 chapters. We will get into chapters 6 through 10 on the next episode, and chapters 11 through 15 on the last episode, and then we'll give our final thoughts and quote unquote criticism about it. But one of the things that I read when it comes to the criticisms of Zachariah Sitchin is that, and again, this is just going into This is not really giving any information regarding the book itself, but just on him as a person doing the independent research. It says the criticism even went so far as to impugn that the fact that he was putting forth academically based research findings and did not hold a faculty position or PhD regarding the topics that he was discussing.
Like it was, they were saying he didn't have the pedigree for it, but it was like an academic, hoity-toity way of saying that he didn't really have the experience for this, for his claims. There's a section here that
I'm gonna use an argument used by ancient alien theorists, conspiracy theorists, ancient aliens dudes on TV on the show that's just ivory tower nonsense. Mm-hmm. Like that's just trying to so like knowledge gate, right? Like paywall, basically. Someone's information based on just the fact whether they spent a long time in school and wrote something that people did completely hate.
I think he was using that as an excuse though to argue for.
Oh, you think Sitchin was using this as like this is just my take, but
but you guys don't believe me because you think you're better than me and you know more. To support his ridiculous claims.
I never felt that because
it seems like. So having read this, like it seems convenient to me that
what Sitchin does very well is that he sets up straw man arguments.
Yes.
Like I actually wrote straw man on the second page of the prologue. Because he says as we ourselves venture into space.
Thank you. I was about to read that.
Acceptance of the ancient scriptures is more than timely.
Yes. Read
now,
that.
The astronauts have landed on the moon and unmanned spacecraft explore other planets. It is no longer impossible to believe that a civilization on another planet more advanced than ours was capable of landing its astronauts on the planet Earth sometime in the past.
How the fuck do you make that jump? Seriously.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm like,
and you don't believe me because you're an elitist.
Thought that was impossible. Like, if you ask, like, even the most like rational level person, like, go like, okay, just suspend belief a little bit. Just like hear this out.
A plus B equals aliens. Fuck you. Yeah.
Do you think it's impossible that there's aliens out there that may have visited the planet at some point if they're advanced? Like, and if people think about it, they go, well, I mean, like, if dealing with the dinosaurs were happening, that's not really a big impact. So maybe.
I mean, I would say that yes. Dude. I would say that yes. But then this is where he comes in, like, and you just read it through there. He comes in with the argument. He says it's no longer impossible to believe that.
Exactly. So he says it with those like straw man.
Kidding me?
Where it's just like, what do you mean? Like, I don't think that anybody thought that
it was out of the realm of possibility to begin with.
Right. He's arguing it as a definite. So he's just saying like it's no longer impossible. Like, well,
wait a minute.
People have thought that like Von Daniken, actually he just goes against Von Daniken right there because Von Daniken posits that very idea years before.
Right. I haven't read anything regarding the fact that he maybe had collaborated or spoken with Von Daniken regarding his theories.
He did have one, like, I can't remember the sentence exactly. I should have written it down, but he does mention how there are other authors who have discussed this kind of idea of like ancient astronauts or whatever visiting the planet. So I think that was kind of a subtle nod to Von Daniken's work.
Yeah, because I mean, as far as I'm aware, Von Daniken was one of the first people to come out with that particular theory.
How many years before he posited that idea? Than
Daniken?
Than Sitchin.
I think his book came out in the 60s, late 60s.
Fuck, okay.
It did.
So that's a pretty
but
good
also then there was also that Russian guy, Emmanuel Velinovsky, who talked about like it was not like an aliens thing, but it was just like, hey, here's some weird space stuff. Like I think there were some like interesting collisions that happened to help form the Earth and some of the planets as we know of them. And then that maybe could have inspired some of Sitchin stuff, as we'll discuss in I think it'll be the second episode of this series.
One other, I guess I say criticism, but one of the things that came out of the book that I was also reading with companion to this one is that Zachariah Sitchin had to deal with what some consider to be academic elitism, which we've just talked about right now.
Right.
It says only those with advanced academic training would be qualified to work with the complex material, and only those with a certain background would be able to reason in sophisticated academic valid ways.
So what's funny, dude, is that he's getting it both ways, dude.
Yeah.
He's able to stiff it because he's like, oh no, I'm just a little rogue academic.
Right.
And then he's like, the real academics are
Going
against
against
me.
the
But then
grain.
there's that the tables are turned now, motherfuckers. Haha. And I'm sitting at both ends eating the fucking ribeye.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, dude, it's so convenient. And whatever.
Well,
For him to
the
use
question I wanted to pose for us is that do we believe that someone who conducts independent research with no official doctorate or degree in a particular field could provide valid research?
Absolutely. In the context of those studies, if it's a good fucking if it's fucking obviously well written and organized and explained, there's no fucking reason why not. But
Yeah, I mean, the person who's doing the research, whether they're
there's nothing-
they're doing it for their doctorate or they're doing it just as research because they
As
have
an
an
amateur.
expert in the field.
right.
You're still kind of going through the work.
It's got nothing to do with
I mean, because
your
as far-
training.
as far-
Although,
yeah,
you know
well,
what,
that's
like,
the thing is,
but
the
although
training.
like the having those degrees, having that experience, having that exposure to
helps.
academia, absolutely, it absolutely fucking makes you more inclined.
But it
to be able
helps
to
in the
make these-
validity of someone who's actually trying to present
Sure.
information and
Sure.
getting
it
some
does,
kind of
yeah.
getting their
But-
peers to kind of
but not from the
accept
standpoint of
that.
not necessarily from the standpoint of it being academically accepted, only from the standpoint of it being academically feasible or acceptable. Excuse me,
See,
because
I think that,
they've got that.
Both currently and definitely today, that formal academics and then like the rogue academics studying the fringe topics have the same
funny
cross to
phrase.
bear, where they're making a claim and thus they have to present the evidence to back that. And particularly more so in the realm of the fringe scientists, they usually don't, but the ones that kind of matter, they do their fucking homework and they
Right.
try to come correct. They have citations, just like the fucking academics. And now with people that are trying to write stuff like on the level, like maybe Sitchin, maybe they've got a little wild hypothesis about how, like, Chateau Hayuk was actually the forebearer of the Sumerians or whatever. They can, like, an independent researcher can say, oh, I'm going to pay, $30 and get access to this
Right.
fucking academic database
Yeah.
that a college sucker is paying thousands of dollars in the end for.
Yeah.
So now, folks can access the same information. And I think that was true back in the day as well. But I think that the ancient aliens didn't apply as much rigor as they should have
No.
to
Right.
really cement their case. Like, I think Sitchin tried,
Yeah.
but actually
Tried.
and he did write like, 6
There's
fucking
some
books
good
of
ideas.
this. But I started reading the second book, Stairway to Heaven, and it's on a completely kind of the same wavelength, but different tangent entirely. And so I feel for the first book as a proxy, it probably needs to be like twice as long for all of the fucking explanation he needs and all of the additional time he needs to present the figures and stanzas from these clay tablets, because there's moments in the first few chapters where he'll cite directly as like, oh, it's from this like broken
it's very
tablet, but we
vague.
get this little bits from it. And then he starts in his like regular paragraph prose about like, and there's some other stuff that really supports this.
Right, yeah. He just uses
but
those
he doesn't
specific
like
fucking
bring that
details.
in. So there's moments that I have in my book where I'm just like, well, why didn't you bring that up? Like, why
Yeah.
don't you cite that directly? Like,
He doesn't go as in depth.
is this your cherry picking of the data again? Like,
right on.
Yeah.
because you're
No,
also
like,
like in ways challenging, academics
Yeah.
Right.
So in ways
you're
he's
gonna
not
do
coming
that,
correct with, because
exactly.
he would have he should have an appendix
Need
that's
to
like
have-
4 times as long as
absolutely.
his book, showing
This is-
all of the fucking figures with explanations as to where these things are, because like the fucking, we talked about this in an earlier chat when we were planning this episode. It's in the first 5 chapters, I believe. It's the fucking snake that's supposed to be in the tree. And he tried to make an argument how that's still a modern symbol of medicine, the
Right.
the
Right,
staff
right.
and the
The
snake
staff
or
and the
whatever.
snake, yeah, and which was first
And
used by the
we
Sumerians.
sat there and looked at our copies of it, and I fucking shoved my fucking book
Yeah.
up against the screen, and we just couldn't find the fucking snake.
No, yeah, exactly.
Where Sitchin should have gone okay, my copy of this.
He should have used some
relief is
references in
shitty,
there to
but
have
I should
some
have put
other
an
people
arrow fucking snake
pointed.
here.
He needs more information supporting his claims in some areas, and in others.
On the fucking very first page of this book, I wrote, he is only critical of hypotheses that don't directly support his arguments.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is just way to stay objective, buddy. The whole point of this is that you have to establish a body of knowledge explaining every side, or you have your hypothesis and your null hypothesis. Okay, I think this, and here are the things that are saying that are against my ideas, but again, the overwhelming body of knowledge supports my thoughts or whatever, and he doesn't really do that.
The one thing I want to go over before we actually get into the first chapter of this book is that what does this book set out to accomplish necessarily? And again, we're going to get deep into it whenever we go into our next episodes with the other chapters. And from what I can decipher, and I need you guys to either correct me or add on to this, is that his main reasoning for writing this book was to decipher a sophisticated cosmogony, which again, cosmogony is the branch of science that deals with the origin of the universe, especially the solar system, and which this explains modern scientific theory. And then it says the first settlements of Earth by the Nephilim, which is again, that is where he jumps into his own theory. And then the momentous events that led to the creation of man and the methods that accomplished this. And again, the origin of mankind specifically.
Yeah, so cosmogony and then mythology. And mythology in the actual
Literal sense.
study of, the literal sense,
he
where
takes
it's,
it in
the origin story,
literal sense of
so
that.
world diver myths, fucking
The deluge myths, the
Great Spider,
myths of
Deluge,
the Garden of
fucking-
Eden, thunder gods, just
Well, I would say those are points to prove his,
but
his
those things
thesis,
will
so to speak.
create men. There's various ideas. So
Right.
this is an alternate idea where, apart from an actual or a mythic being, these are aliens that are purported to be
gods,
mythic beings,
right? Gods of
Right.
heaven.
And Sitchin saying well, here's the puzzle, but I think to frame the first 5 chapters, chapters 1 through 4 is basically a history of
Yeah,
mankind,
the history of
and
mankind folded
as far
into
as their
biblical
development,
history.
kind of the evolutionary history of man
Right.
for the first chapter, and we'll go into this detail. But I'm just trying to tie this all together a little bit.
Well, I mean, I
So
like how he
then-
does that. I mean,
So
I like
then
how he
he
approaches it. Excuse me.
Goes into trying to figure out, where did civilization begin? Kind of where did all this wonderful stuff that we have now kind of come from?
Right.
And so then he starts tracing the archaeology of
Right, the historical record from that,
and
then he mixes
historical
in
records.
he mixes
the
in the developments
written
of
records left
religions.
behind. just the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, it is very ambitious. I unfortunately to me this guy was writing a dissertation, but not publishing it. This is not even a manuscript. He's printing his notes or whatever. It's not like you can see the elements of what he's trying to do here, but it's just so goddamn like disjointed and jumbled that it's
well. I disagree that these are mere notes, man. Like,
well, I mean,
this guy is just,
they seem
okay. So assuming that he is this brilliant mind that can read and translate all of these old, clay tablets from various cultures and tie all of these, grandiose, because it's pretty grand. I mean, it is ambitious. He's like tying,
he's making a fucking chronology of
Rome to
East.
fucking Sumeria,
right,
through their religion,
right. Yeah, so like again, like he's tying the historical. He's being very literal with everything. He's tying the historical record to the to the biblical record and just like tracing it back to the origins of civilization.
Right, and one thing that is kind of annoying that Sitchin does is that he always kind of shoehorns like the Old Testament back in.
Right. Yeah. That's one of his main sources.
He uses that as a direct tie-in. Like, okay, look, this proves this.
Well,
this proves this.
I think he does that because like that's like one of the things that that people can relate to specifically, so they can use that as the draw back to the claims that he's making.
So I've come across this before. I don't know necessarily how anyone might particularly disagree with me, but to me, like the Old Testament, the Bible, it like I don't look at it as necessarily a collection of like proverbs or just necessarily mythological
fables,
right? No, like to me, it's not mythological lessons per se. Like those elements of like Jesus walking on water, fucking Satan like walking through the desert, those kinds of things.
You're talking about New Testament, Roland.
I'm just trying to use it as an example. I don't know I don't know shit about the Old Testament. Like I'm sort of trying to use that as well because that's his main reference.
Okay,
what I mean
now
to say
I'm
is
really
the Bible,
curious where you're trying to go with this.
So what I mean to say is like the Bible in general isn't necessarily like a pure metaphorical reference to living life, to like the rules of society. It is it's a form of a historical record, or rather it has that information mixed in because the people at the time like were just using that information to like establish their history. Like that's what it is. It's a book on history. You just need to be able to separate the like the esoteric bullshit or whatever, the angels and demons necessarily stuff from like the more mundane things.
But Roland, you can't, because that's their worldview.
I mean, yes, but like, so that's why I say like I wouldn't take all of it in stride or whatever. Like I would use it in the same sort of method that like he seems to be, like as a tool to point to like particular facts, to like historical events, those sorts of things.
Well, I mean, he uses the comparison to like as far as like the deluge. He compares. He draws back to the story of Noah.
Again, the Garden of Eden. He finds
the Garden of Eden with the
agriculture,
like the as far as like
location of Abraham.
Yeah, the chronology of how like the man had progressed as far as like the way they've I guess came up with things again with the agriculture.
It's been
situation.
Established that
he draws back to the I think it was Genesis where he talks about like God.
Yep.
And, right. So like obviously I'm going to ignore things like fucking, like things about like stuff. Like about Leviathan or like the demiurge, those kinds of things. Like I'm trying to find like again more mundane passages in there that they're able to. And he even mentions in here they're able to go and find like the city of Ur,
and there's a whole field of like biblical archaeology,
right?
Where they go through and they use the Bible
and
to like try to ground truth.
Physically prove it.
Yes,
you're right. That's what I think of it as in those particular aspects.
Like I will agree, Roland. Like the Bible, it does have like a nice historical record. Like at least
the parts of it that are grounded.
The winner's viewpoint of things or whatever, or the alleged oppressed of, the winner's circle.
I love that.
The winner's circle.
That's so funny, dude.
But then it's just like Aesop's fables, and I'm just like restricting this to the Old Testament because that's what Sitchin's working with. So Aesop's fables, because you have like Proverbs and you have some ridiculous shit going on in fucking the
book of Job.
Job, yeah. But all the things about angels and demons and it's their worldview, so you can't like discount that because it's so cool to think about how people thought like that.
Absolutely.
Back in the day, allegedly.
What I mean,
this has all been like stripped down and raped by the Council of Nicaea.
Without and then also the bullshit from the Council of Nicaea has been ground truth by the historian who probably never existed, Josephus, who made up a bunch of random bullshit to support and then you have like biblical archaeologists going to look at Josephus's bullshit, which is bullshit on the earlier bullshit. So you just mound bullshit. But then every once in a while they go like, we found this site. Right. And it's like, okay, cool. You demonstrated that a place this like fucking mythic tome talked about. So actually I don't even necessarily think that, but that I couldn't argue that like valid. He says, I couldn't argue that he even necessarily believes everything in the Bible. Like he's just, again, using these specific stories and locations to try to tie in a particular paragraph.
Honestly, I would think that Zachariah Sitchin is pretty big Christian.
He is.
And I quote,
oh God.
Okay, the Old Testament has filled my life from childhood. First sentence of the fucking book.
Yeah. But again, like
splat.
Again, this guy cherry picks the fuck out of it's a fucking plot device for his goddamn thesis. Or whatever.
Oh, a fringe theorist is cherry picking.
But in the same vein, he's trying to like generalize the fuck out of everything, saying that like, no, this is all true, and here we go. These are the points or whatever. Like, he's trying, like you said before, he's trying to have it both ways, and.
And like it's really very fucky. Both, man. Ribeye, potatoes.
It's very fucky. Yeah, I need some extra gravy on this shit. Just some fucking grilled onions, some butter. Come on. So
let's get into the first chapter, which is the shortest chapter of the whole book. And the first chapter is called The Endless Beginning.
10 pages.
Well, it's not even 10 pages. So basically, from what I could surmise from this chapter is that he's basically giving you, the reader, a very introductory version of what he's about to talk about. So basically,
he's going through the story. He starts with his historical record.
Yeah, and basically he's talking about like man and how humanity. They have whatever they originated and how they've kind of I guess the next they've evolved over time.
And he makes a distinction to the establishment of the thinking man.
He says, Daniel, go ahead.
So a lost opportunity. So once again, like circling back on the idea that Sitchin had so many opportunities to have a lot more explanation of what the fuck was like supporting his arguments. Mm-hmm. So here, so regarding, life on this planet, if it began through a series of spontaneous chemical reactions, why does life on Earth have but a single source and not a multitude of chance sources? And why does all living matter on Earth contain too little of the chemical elements that abound on Earth and too much of those that are rare on our planet? But he doesn't talk about what fucking
he doesn't talk about the probable impossibility of life.
The question that he poses in the very first, I guess the third paragraph was life then imported to Earth from elsewhere? And that is just in the very beginning. That he's already like just jumping to that question.
He's maybe 100 words into this book, guys.
Yeah. And so some of the things that he does say regarding man, it says man originated in Asia from some 500,000 years ago, but as older fossils were found, it became evident that the mills of evolution grind much, much slower. It says man's ancestor apes are now placed at a staggering 25 million years ago. And it says discoveries in the East Africa reveal the transition from man-like apes, the hominids,
to
some 14 million years ago. So I mean, he's going through like the various stages of evolution for man, and talking about how either they've quickly evolved or how they slowly evolved.
So like his argument is that like if it's taking so long for us to reach this particular stage, you know, like where like there it makes no sense necessarily that we started this far back,
but then
this far back ago, and then like we took this long to develop, and like it slowly picked up the pace, like we became like more and more advanced over a slower period, or excuse me, a faster period of time, and that doesn't make sense. Like I don't know, that seems
well, and to defend him, and like this will be like an afterthought thing, but a whole lot's been learned about, and a lot more stuff's been found about human evolution. You know, we still just have like, and he does make a salient point here where he talks about how we just have a few bits of jaw, you know, a few vertebrae, you know, like we do have really a very limited record of what was going on in the past. But since his writing, we've filled out a lot more of an understanding. We're still pretty clueless, but we have some better ideas.
Yeah. What it does, it seems like, I don't know, it like his logic seems backwards to me in that like he thinks that okay, like there should be like a standard progression, or rather like
and he fucks up because he talks about how like this stark change in humans when, as he argues later, that the aliens arrive and start making them, maybe and showing them how to do stuff. But when he's talking about these evolutionary leaps, particularly when it comes to like Cro-Magnons and then modern Homo sapiens,
as opposed to millions of years between Australopithecus and Homo erectus,
the advent of
hundreds
fire,
of thousands,
dude, and then like the big gut versus or small gut versus like big brain arguments and stuff, where just with the advent of fire, just with processing foods, humans were able to fucking just get way more calories from
way
their
more
foods
advanced,
just at base, and so you had this like exchange, and then food was more efficiently processed.
So they were spending less time hunting and gathering. They had more time for leisure. That is to say, more time for thought. And so then you have the generation of like art of like, like the cosmogony.
Yeah, you start seeing like those beautiful fucking paintings in like fucking Spain and shit,
right?
And in France, like,
right.
So that's where like I have a little bit of difficulty understanding him. Like he's trying to use like a very I don't know. Like I want the easiest
and
explanation
I think
to me is
even
that
at the time of his writing, they found Neanderthal burials.
Right. Yeah. Like his. So by the so that was something that we had wanted to sort of go through in this book, is in that like, okay, this came out in the 70s, but like since then, there have been like a lot of breakthroughs that have pushed the.
I mean, because at the time he's basically as far as like the missing link of like the evolution of man.
Even at the time of writing,
it's been pushed around
there was data out there, particularly with stuff archaeologically out of Africa at the time, because there's a lot of shit in the 50s and 60s out of Africa that was like really groundbreaking in the early finds of like hominin evolution.
So that is something I suppose we'll need to address.
Like the Leakey's work.
Yes,
if that rings a bell, the Roland.
Damn it, I was looking.
Oh yes, earlier. Thank you for computering.
Yeah.
One of the things I have highlighted here is that he says is that modern man has many fossil collateral relatives but no progenitors, and the derivation of Homo sapiens then becomes a puzzle. So basically, that's
and
like
what's funny is it's like
the missing link, right?
Like Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon.
Yeah, but I mean that would be like considered like the missing link in between like the Darwin evolution of man, right? I mean, like there's a point in time where man, there's not some kind of connection.
There's no it's not a direct
But again, this is
transformation. It's a transition.
This is information that he's going by basically in the 70s. So I mean, like this is fairly new.
And that is only like, I mean, just stating that there's a missing link. There's multiple links. Like we find one and then we find another and another and another.
But the thing is that I think he's pointing out in the first chapter is that like the missing link is the fact that man emerged with all this knowledge and like the thinking man, the Homo sapien,
right, which is a gap in the
he's attributing that to the fact that there's some outside interference that helped man kind of speed up their evolutionary process.
He's trying to fill the gaps with his theories, which
it's aliens.
Like I can understand how he would do that or why he would do that necessarily. But the thing is in that, like, the information just wasn't there. Like, he's doing his best to, fill in the gaps. But, like, it's been established since then that, like, there's...
Well, the main thing that he's trying to say, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the first chapter, he's trying to say that it doesn't seem probable that man could advance so quickly in thought and in tools and agriculture and civilization, writing, because prior to the thinking man or Homo sapien, every other version of quote unquote man took millions and millions of years to kind of get to just very small steps in their progression.
So he's trying to look at it from like a very, I don't know, like a very slow progression as opposed to like a snowballing effect or whatever, because like once the fucking microprocessor was first developed, like that's when, we had computers the sizes of like my fucking room here or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, a few decades later, all of a sudden they're on your wrist.
So Roland, that's a nice little kind of tie-in to Neanderthals versus Homo sapiens brains, because Neanderthals actually had larger brains than us.
They
on average.
did, and bigger isn't always better as that goes. But like in this particular case, like it's an assumption they make that, like, again, like for those particular I'm losing it here for that, but like the point is that it's not necessarily, it isn't necessarily proven that it's able to, or rather, excuse me, I need more alcohol. Like I know what you were saying, Daniel. Please just continue here.
Well, so to our poor listeners that have hung in with us so far, I truly invite you to check this book out. It's available in many formats, but it's a wild ride, and it kind of tries to break you in certain ways. Like it's weird. It's a fucking crazy book, dudes. And so every time we've talked about this book as a group before this recording, and it's manifesting here, we have been incredibly confused about this book.
It's really hard to make.
Yeah.
So it's just a wild ride because he just,
because you don't want to outright say like he's full of shit. Like he does have some interesting
but then
work.
But then I am personally conflicted with this book, and I know Roland is, and not sure how
Ray loves
on
this
the
shit.
archaeological record and shit that you are, Ray.
Well,
but also,
just to give a little, I guess, trivia regarding my knowledge, I have none whatsoever. I'm going into this book just as a blind person. I all the information that he's presenting as a person who has no background,
like new or whatever.
Yeah, I can only take it at face value that he knows what he's talking about and that he's presenting it truthfully. So I can only take that information as he's giving it to me, because I mean I'm also counting on you guys, because I mean, you guys have a bit of a background on some of like the archaeology background of this. But I can only assume that if maybe he's making a claim that seems a little out there, that you can call bullshit on that.
This would probably
because I mean the average listener, the average person reading this book, I do not think, this is just an opinion, I don't think that they would be someone who has a background in like archaeology, anthropology, or any sort of cultural background, ancient history right. For Sumerians, Greek, whatever, Roman.
Right. Yeah.
They're just the average person, especially for myself. Like I couldn't say like, oh, well, I'm going to call bullshit on that. The only thing I can call bullshit on maybe is if he's saying anything biblically, because I mean I have a fairly, I say sort of, I'm not gonna say extensive, but I mean I have a comfortable background in the Bible, so he's making a claim,
folks,
with the Bible, and then asserting that
you can assess that pretty fairly,
right? Yeah, but I mean like,
gotcha.
But he's using that as a reference to like what he's claiming. So I mean, again, I can only assume that what he's saying.
And one thing, as a former archaeologist, he did cite Robert Braidwood, who, when he was discussing advent of agriculture, and Braidwood's an important guy. He's cited still like in dissertations on anything about origins of agriculture bullshit. His ideas are a little dated, but yeah, like when he was talking about like, oh, you see all these things coming up, like, wheat, barley, these other, staple grains and shit. But, just one thing that like I fight with, trying to top up these episodes, because we're going to get to these, follow up, ideas, but it's like, okay, well, there's evidence of oxen or being fucking domesticated like 10,000 years ago. It was or like 10,000 BC, and then like really early domestication events of a ton of fucking staple crops all over the world at different times.
Yep. Like actually, a lot of the modern ones that we are using today, like apparently, like were staple diets for ancient Sumerians. Fucking onions, goddamn. Peaches, cherries, all this ridiculous stuff. Like, I was kind of surprised reading that the available diet that these guys had going for.
Oh yeah, but there's all this other stuff going on around the world, and all these other civilizations coming up very early. Like I'm thinking about like the Andes area.
Oh, okay.
Because you have stuff that's
where you have like the parallels of I don't know, like their particular cultures where you have so like you said the Andes, but I was thinking of like the ziggurats that they mentioned in here, because those were also prevalent in South America and Mesoamerica, and so it's like those guys were a sea across from each other, and they still like they had those exact same designs.
Well, and that's a whole other episode, I think, just
stepped pyramids,
or a whole other just shit pile of conversation to get into, just the phenomenon of mound building,
their own and then their own developments of pottery, their own developments of the fucking like textiles. And
I mean, you can say that kind of like ties into chapter 2, which is called the Sudden Civilization.
Sorry, I say the staples, but like to me, those are not to me, but like they seem to be the standards of civilization. Right. You have to have a established
but it's like, why do you have like iconography from the southern Peru area, like Paracas pottery, looking like stuff that's out of like the Pacific Northwest, in like the United States and Canada.
So that's where I have a little problem with.
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
again, I'm gonna say like kind of moving into chapter 2, the Sun Civilization.
So sorry. So let's tie back our original like final thought on.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
What chapter 1 was about was just mankind should not have sprouted at the timeline that it should.
Right.
But from Sitchin's viewpoint, because like to the rest of us, it's like it's a snowball effect. Once something picks up, it picks up fucking traction or whatever, it just starts.
Yeah, I
building
mean,
upon itself,
just
becoming greater and greater and greater with the establishment, or rather,
I think you kind of hinted at it, Roland. To apply it to modern day, technology was fairly slow in the very beginning, even the 90s, 2000. As soon as it hit like 2005, like technology sped up so fucking fast. And you can almost attribute that.
We're living in the days of Star Trek, motherfuckers. We've got
we have a phone that we can see each other on our phones and shit.
We've got fucking wrist mounted goddamn.
And that was in less than a decade.
Yeah.
So I mean,
thanks Apple. I fucking hate you, but way to go.
Yeah. Well,
fucking iPhone. Hey.
But regarding, I'm sorry, Daniel, were you gonna give any more thoughts to the first chapter?
No.
Well, okay. So the sun civilization. I was telling Roland earlier when we were kind of discussing a bit of a condensed version of these chapters is that sun civilization, I feel when I was reading it, gives basically a list of things that progressed faster than normal.
It's like a checklist or whatever of what you need to become like a predominant prevailing.
Yeah, he talks about like again he brings up cuneiform writing,
advanced civilization,
agriculture. He brings up even banking, monetary, the way they did monetary things.
So like a lot of the old ancient texts, a lot of the ancient like clay tablets and whatnot, they were records of inventory. Just like they were just counting things. Okay, how much grain do we have? How much corn do we have available? Like what is the amount of like fucking goats and like cattle? Like do we have? Like they were just keeping lists of things. It wasn't necessarily like the history or like particular events. Like primarily, it was all just record keeping.
Well, no, but it's like that's two-sided, because you have the record-keeping elements, and you also have the
absolutely, like
storytelling. I mean, that's also like going back to the Andes, the quipus, the knotted rope systems.
Right.
Like,
yes.
Archaeologists have like pretty much figured, and art historians have pretty much figured out like how the number system works. Mm-hmm. Or sorry, like the mathematical quipus.
What I meant to say
where
is
it's like
that,
for accounting, but then they have the other quipus where they have
stories.
No idea what the fuck they mean.
Right? Yeah, because they don't.
But they
match
think
up.
It's about like storytelling and shit, or like mythos and shit.
What I mean to say is, or meant to say, excuse me, is in that like the bulk of the records that were recovered and analyzed and interpreted and translated, weren't necessarily just like, it wasn't necessarily just like things about religion or like their history. It was like more mundane things, like, okay, this is what I've got in storage for this particular season. Like again, like
sure. Tons of that was
like, it was just what people what necessarily like the common misconception, I would say, is that like a lot of the like ancient hieroglyphs or cuneiform or writing like had to do with stories more than it actually had to do with it was just information. Like it was just data. Like these guys were just they were just keeping track of shit as it was going by, or whatever. Like these were just like very. Well, I mean, it wasn't as, I guess, necessarily as exciting as what most folks would necessarily consider.
I think it is.
No, look, I think it's fucking cool as fuck because
it's not just daily happenings, but those daily happenings happen to be movements of the stars,
right? So
various battles that have taken place.
That's separate. Like
coup d'etats or whatever.
I'm trying to make the distinction between like. Data or whatever. Again, like the more mundane things, God damn it! Like I'm trying to make a distinction that like the bulk of the information that was retained wasn't necessarily history. It wasn't necessarily like events or religion. It was like boring shit, or what most people would consider to be boring. Like I wouldn't myself, because again, like you can take that information and you can make really cool like observations about it, like as opposed to.
So I'm going to try to translate for the public ear.
Thank you, Daniel. You're so helpful doing me this favor.
What your point is that perhaps that Sitchin and other people lean on all of this fantastic kind of stuff. But the majority of the record we have behind is of the more kind of mundane things, taxes, fucking how many sheep I have in this pen, a love letter I may have written to somebody on a broken piece of pottery, which happened in Egypt with Ostraka, actually.
Right. It wasn't all that amazing necessarily to what you would expect.
So probably, bulk of
unless
the records,
you knew what to do with that kind of thing.
95% mundane shit, and then 5%'s the fantastic, the gods. And,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I understand. Like most people to assume that it's about. Like they're talking about these personifications of nature and life and death and all this, the gods and
what?
Goddamn you! Goddamn you!
You just kind of came.
No. Like again,
what the fuck, man?
Fucking heaven.
I'm a little fucked up, but I don't think that makes any sense in the context of our discussion right now.
It makes perfect sense.
I'm sorry.
Again,
please bring it.
Most of the things that you would assume, or I would expect most people to assume, that are stories about heaven and earth, or like the Garden of Eden, those kinds of things. Like it's not like that at all. It's just information. Okay, it's like things that they were taking notes or whatever about what happened in this particular. Like it's seasonal, fucking sedentary observations of like what they're doing, or excuse me, not what they're doing.
Roland, you're like confusing this message, I think.
No,
dude.
no, you suck.
I'm not trying to be shitty. Like, is it just me, Ray? Like, because it's like your conversation right now is like Sitchin's writing, where you're trying to talk about the fantastic, and then you go back to the mundane, and then you talk about it's fantastic again, and then it's not.
So I'm just repeating my fucking self over and over again. Like the point is that I was trying to say is that like a lot of this stuff most folks wouldn't consider interesting. They wouldn't think this like, here we go. This is this is a biblical fucking story.
Daniel, I don't know if you can see me like every time. In this past conversation, like I'm like like tossing my head, like going like what?
You bitch.
And it's not to say that it's like making it's not like nonsense or anything. Is that like I feel like you're making the point, but at some point
I'm repeating myself.
You're speaking to yourself, and it's hard for us to kind of decipher what you're trying to say to the people listening and to us, but you understand yourself.
Yeah,
unfortunately, we don't.
You're trying to like work it out mostly. Yeah. Like it's like those half conversations where it's like you're speaking in complete, sentences to somebody, but you're referencing stuff that only you know about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Like, of course, you've read this scroll from the 14th century about
you fucking
how the Franciscan monks needed more porridge or something.
It's pronounced Franciscan, but okay, I get it.
Roland, I would say fuck you, man. Roland, I'm gonna say this to you, and Daniel. I mean, you got to assume your audience is me.
Yeah.
Like I don't know shit about most of this stuff, so I mean, like I can follow you guys because I read the book and I can make the references to whatever you're saying kind of parallel to whatever is going on here. But to the listener, who probably hasn't read the book or doesn't know anything about like the history of
get
anthropology
good,
and stuff like that. Get good, be good. Melania
you
Trump.
You know what? All I gotta say to that is this, dude. They got what they paid for.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to chapter 3, and me reading chapter 3, I see chapter 3 as a very. I told Roland this is a very difficult chapter for me because it's a lot of information regarding past myths in the Greek, Roman. Gives a lot of names. Jumps back and forth. Doesn't seem very linear as far as like how he's describing. Comparisons and stuff like that.
We haven't talked about chapter 2 yet, but I'll sum up chapter 2 basically as the historical search for Sumer, like the earliest civilization, and then chapter 3, I think it's like the gods of the earth or whatever it is.
The land of the gods. Land of the gods. Sumer, land of the gods. I'm sorry, that's wrong.
No,
that's
sorry.
That's
That's
incorrect.
chapter
I'm
4.
sorry. It's gods of heaven and earth. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. So in this chapter, it's basically an extension. He gets past like the kind of the historical background he established for tracing some of these cultures, and then he jumps right into their religious iconography and worldviews.
Right. Again, I had a hard time kind of following along with this chapter, reading and listening to it, the audiobook. It kind of just, everything just starts to like make some
It's
kind of
very
mishmash in my
jumbled.
brain, and I couldn't follow along necessarily with everything that he's presenting
He jumps around a lot
because he jumps around a lot.
He talks about.
Could you guys make any sense of like how he was trying to present the information?
Yes.
Daniel,
he-
please.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't say I was going to, as I can.
If you can, then
like,
please go ahead.
He
No,
chapter 2 he tries to trace like the chronology from like what we consider from a historical standpoint to be the dominant cultures or the dominant points of like establishing civilization. So he starts with the Greeks, saying that what most people assume to be the origins of language.
I mean, he's
of
basically
philosophy,
like presenting the information that
or actually themselves
the
saying
gods in all these mythologies are
they're
from
actually
the gods of Sumer.
They're adapted, or rather,
Right,
translated
but
from
he
previous
presents it in a
civilizations.
like reverse chronology where he
Yes,
goes,
yeah.
okay, so we think about the Greeks and the
Greeks
Romans,
and the Romans.
and then at one point he discusses their pantheon,
Right.
Well, the major
And
figures
how-
at least,
and how like
then he
they,
goes, oh, but even the Greeks talked about how they drew inspiration from an earlier source.
right,
They go
yes.
to Egypt,
They go
Right.
to Egypt,
and then find a lot of the same figures and representations. And then he goes, well, let's go a step further, a step
Further
further.
back.
So all of the folks he brings up are not necessarily relevant to our discussion, but he just keeps tracing back, watching these religious figures through time,
So
but going in reverse chronological order,
To
trying to
get
find
back-
where the fucking origin point is for these stories.
right, and he ends up back with the Sumerian culture. The Greeks and the Romans trace their information from the Egyptians, who trace their information back from the Akkadians and the not the Akkadians, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, who trace their information back from the Akkadians because, as it turns out, they're an offshoot branch from them.
From the Sumerians, yeah.
Right, who the Akkadians themselves are a progression from the Sumerians.
Well, and then there's also and I can see why this chapter may be confusing because as you mentioned earlier, you've got kind of a decent handle on the Bible, Ray.
Yeah.
So you read about shit like the Hittites, the Hurrians, the Canaanites,
Right.
and that's familiar ground. But then it's set in this like wider context that's like really wild because it's like,
Right.
well, not just this one religious worldview
No.
with a couple like
It talks about them
counter
as, like,
narratives, like with when the Canaanites got brought up in the Old Testament, when
they were contemporaneous
when
with,
when the Israelites went to Canaan. But then it's like, okay, well, here's this religious mythos, and I think that there was a lost opportunity from Sitchin, and he maybe gets to it in his later books, but the ties of these various figures in Sumeria still showing up in modern day religion.
Right.
right. Yes.
Yeah. The
So,
one
like-
the one
like the
thing
things
is
where
It's just fascinating. It just I just see so many like missed opportunities. Even like writing in the 70s, so many missed opportunities to just
I
follow
think
the rabbit hole of this research.
I think for me, I would need this information to be compartmentalized. You talk about one thing, and then you kind of move on to the next, and then kind of reference it.
He kind of
that's
does,
just me,
but
though.
the theme is, tracing this pantheon
Right.
Yeah.
and identifying these figures,
it
which
seems
become
like-
relevant in the later chapters.
Right.
But he's going like, well, here's where we think they started. Oh, wait, earlier reference.
It seems like a very,
he's going
very
through a very like a
loose,
relative systematic like analysis of it, because he jumps culture to culture,
Right.
but he still bring up the same things, like,
Right.
oh, this sun god, this moon god,
Right.
this
Thunder god.
principal deity of
Yeah.
warfare.
And I mean, for me personally, I mean, I can see what he's trying to do, but as he's presenting the information, it gets lost in my brain whenever he says something and then he reverts back to like the comparisons to other cultures, as opposed to just like talking about one culture, then moving on to the next,
I think
and then
that-
saying like, okay, then he's talking about this.
I think that like
he's trying to thread a needle of discourse.
Yeah, and I think
Through-
that
through it
like,
as well, which
and that's
I
what
don't
I
think
see.
he
Like
does-
it's very thin needle
Very,
of discourse.
yeah,
So like
absolutely.
that's what doesn't resonate in my brain whenever he's talking about
it's-
this kind of stuff.
I think it's very loose, like the comparisons
But
or the
actually, I
lines
think
that he
that-
draws between each of
That
these,
word
these
loose
cultures.
works really well for this, because once again, there's so many things, ideas you could expand
Yeah,
upon.
exactly.
Right,
like
yeah.
we need
And
more
maybe
elaboration.
this chapter should have been about 3 times longer, so you could talk about like
at least.
really, go into
Yeah.
like Egypt, and then really go into fucking Assyria, really go into Canaan,
Right,
really
right, yeah.
needs to
and then Babylonia
elaborate
or
Yeah.
Babylon.
on a lot of these. Like
know.
he's just very matter of fact and
Because he also makes a lot of like assumptions and jumps and leaps in logic in this book. I underlined somewhere in there where he's like, well, there's no doubt that the Hurrians were of Indo-European like origin.
Yeah.
They were probably the first fucking Hindus, like.
right, yeah. The Vedics
But he makes
brought
these
their information over
but
to the
he
Greeks.
does like throughout these like these nice, relatively tight discussions of iconography that once again ties these religious figures through time and space as it
Like
occurs,
he has
'cause
some
it pops
good,
up in
he has
parts
some
of the
good
world.
examples, but it really needs to be fleshed out in further
See,
detail.
and I think that the book that probably should have been written would have been more like Gods of Eden, because
Sure.
a lot
Have you-
of shit gets
okay,
invoked
so,
in
like,
that. Like,
yeah.
doesn't even Bramley bring up some New World shit?
you guys
Yeah,
have
yeah.
read the both of you guys have read Gods of Eden, right?
Yeah.
Or-
Yes.
Well, yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, I have
Loved
no. Ray just dropped me the copy here now, and like I've got no. I've yet to crack it. Obviously.
Yeah,
So
but
that's what I wanted to
so
ask.
if we're looking like on an evolutionary trajectory as far as like
7
refinement
years.
of research and homework of which are the same thing of ancient alien stuff, like you see a clear like break from Von Daniken to Sitchin, and then
Right.
definitely to Bramley. And it's just fantastic. I can't wait for you to get through that book,
Yeah.
Roll.
It's
But we have to get
So-
through this book first.
Yeah.
right.
Like,
Yeah, like I was telling Ray,
and
like
we have 3 fucking episodes at least. for
all
it,
the
so.
tabs that like we covered in the past 2 chapters or whatever. Like I didn't even crack the book going through any of these details. Like we just rattled off all of them. Fine.
Daniel, he fucking used all the tabs that I had in the back of the book in just the first
2 chapters.
2 chapters.
I don't know if you
like-
can see all this.
I was like, okay, man, like sure. But that's good because I mean, like, those
I
are all
need
the
more.
notes that need to be made.
Like,
whenever you're talking about this book specifically.
Yeah, but because like this guy just is on some bullshit, man. Like, he just, like,
yeah, man.
like he just because he just makes these like super bold claims off of like very limited
God.
exposure of these case studies in time. So he's like, well, of course this happened.
Right.
Here's
the proof.
Maybe. Of course this happened.
Regarding Zachariah Sitchin and his research, I mean, I believe what I've heard or read
These are some
and listened to is that like he did almost over a decade of research before he presented this book specifically.
Really?
So I mean, like, it's not to say that he just kind of it went from like 1 year to the next that he read this and kind of made these assumptions or claims. Like he took time to research, and of course he was like going through like the tablets and like the biblical like Greek and Hebrew and all that kind of shit to make all these claims and like to write this book in general. So I mean, like, you can't say for sure. You can't say that he just did it off a whim or just he just farted this shit out. You know,
decades of research went into this, but I wonder what his original premise was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like what question, like the original thing that like led to this book, because this wasn't the whole idea. You know, like it may have been something as innocent as like, I want to make sure the Old Testament's right.
But yeah, so I mean, like,
you probably start with like, angels are real. Like, I mean,
you did mention it earlier in the episode, Daniel, that when he was a child,
with jetpacks,
he questioned his like Sunday school teacher, regarding the Nephilim. You know,
like he was like in Hebrew school or something. Not trying to like sound racist. I think that's like what he called it. Like,
but I call, like you said the same thing. Like I call bullshit on that because I mean, no.
Of course, we can't. The person is not alive to corroborate the story.
They would have beat his ass black and blue.
So he said the teacher explained, but I mean, they're talking about fucking Genesis in fucking school, so probably like it's all about the Old Testament. Probably Hebrew school or whatever they call it. And this is how we get demonetized by talking about how we don't understand what Hebrews call their schooling if they are religious.
All right, so we got to move on to chapter 4, Sumer, Land of the Gods.
Yes.
This is where things get pretty spicy because he does, drop a good amount of information about these deities because, chapter 3 was all about just establishing the the antecedent forms of these same gods.
Yeah, this is kind of like in the introduction of where he's talking about the actual quote unquote gods that came
he's
down.
Getting to like, okay, Sumer, like this is where we're talking about. Like,
you mean
this is where the book happens.
Sumer, right?
Sumer.
Yeah, Schumer or Shinar.
Yes, I love that. Shinar.
Or Shinar.
Shinar.
Which I looked that up, like, so because he's very confident about like talking about how the Bible calls it like Shinar or whatever. So I looked it up sometime last week, and generic Google search, and the only reference to Sumeria being called Shinar is in the Bible. There's no other link to it, like which is kind of fascinating, but it's like, well, might as well just call it like Schumer at least,
I would like to get into very briefly like the characters that are introduced into this in this chapter.
Oh, so you're talking about the mythology, that he starts to go into.
The gods that down to.
Yeah, exactly. The gods that he's introducing into this chapter.
The gods responsible for,
and you have to the listeners have to understand that
the creation of humanity.
There's never a consistent name.
No, it jumps
with these gods. I mean, there's like variations throughout the mythology regarding the names of these gods.
Yeah, so like Ea can be Enlil,
right?
Yeah,
or no, Ea is Enki and Enlil's another dude.
Well, it's An or Anu.
No, Anu is the father.
That's
Anu is Anu.
Yeah, someone is one of the characters.
He is.
He's Ra in
Yes,
Egyptian
yes,
mythology.
yes. He's
You know,
Ra.
you never like
And
actually see Anu.
in Roman and Greek. He's is it Cronus? I forget. I forget what the Roman equivalent of that was. It wasn't Jupiter. It was,
No, I think it was Cronus for
just to
like
get
a new dude.
a real quick genealogy
Yes.
as far as like the gods that are introduced in this chapter. So we have Anu,
right,
which is the head of the gods.
right, and he has his
Right.
two sons.
Yeah, we have Enlil, which is Anu's son,
right,
the ruler of Earth, and then we have
Enki.
E or Enki.
Ea and Enki.
Ea,
Yeah.
sorry,
Ea
Ea or
I think it's
Enki.
Ea.
And yes, Ea or Enki. They're both responsible for the creation of humanity. It originally, he states that I think Enlil was the one that brought about civilization, but then it also goes
But
in.
Ea made Adama.
Which
Or
is
Adapa.
Adam.
Adapa.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Adam.
Or Adam. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
Adam.
Adapa, yeah. I think was the
And Enki was
the model human.
And so he goes on to say Enki was the engineer behind humanity's creation.
Right.
So like they're both credited with having a direct hand. In
Yes, and Zachariah Sitchin did write a book called The Lost Book of Enki, which I used to own. I don't own it anymore. But that goes into more of a deep dive into
right, and
Enki's
they
role
have
in,
their own deluge event. They allow they quote unquote Noah to escape the flood.
Yeah. But so let's return to this pantheon.
Right. Okay.
Their array, if you will.
There was the half sister, right? Which she is essentially
Inanna, yeah.
Ninhursag, right? She is
Ninhursag, yeah,
she's credited as the mother goddess, which is the if I'm not mistaken, the old statuettes that they have of like the very like sort of
like the fertility goddess,
right? The fertility goddess. Thank you. They also referred to her as Mammy, which is apparently where we get the modern.
No, Mamu.
Well, so it was Mamu, quote unquote Mammy, and like that's where we get mommy from.
Is this the chapter? I don't remember. Only listening to it the second time around, where there's a rape that goes on in this chapter.
Right. So that is
Enlil.
Right, and Lil,
Because that's how he gets Ninlil.
Yeah,
his wife,
he rapes Sud or
Ninhursag, his half sister, because he was trying to he was
Make a
trying
son.
he was trying to make a son. He didn't. He had a daughter, and then so he has sex with a daughter, who bears another daughter. Has sex with her.
Just listening to the audiobook itself a couple months ago, whenever this part came around, it was very cringy to listen to because the way
Hear you said it out loud,
even just the way it's written and the way that gets read aloud. Yeah,
Enki decided his son should be the successor to the throne if he couldn't, because Enki and Enlil were at odds at all times. Enlil was the legitimate successor. Enki was not.
Yeah, he was the firstborn. Yeah, there
Right.
was a whole
And
thing.
so
So like
Enki-
in all of this like weird god incest
Right,
shit
like
that we're getting into.
if you had
the whole
a
thing is,
child with like a spawn of the main like the main deity, like that particular son or daughter was the legitimate heir, and so that's why he tried to bang Ninhursag. But the thing is, they had to have a masculine heir, and so that's when he started having. Or excuse me, she bore a daughter who bore a daughter after Enki, tried with that again. And he draws a parallel between that and like you said, Adapa and Adam. So Ninhursag, also known as Ninti, and Eve. And apparently Enlil, on his first bangarang with Ninhursag, has a son. And so he's the he's the legitimate heir, Ninurta, which was I don't know. I don't quite recall if they drew a parallel between him and Zeus, because he was a lightning god as well.
Well, at first they did talk about it was
Storm
either
god.
Enlil or Enki was associated with, I think it was Ea, so Enki was the like thunder god or wind god or whatever.
Okay.
And then, but these roles get like passed on somehow between the god or among the gods, because Ninurta, I believe, later became like the god of like thunder or whatever.
Yeah. Ninurta was the god of lightning.
Right.
And he marries someone else. Some Bao, a nurse, bringer of life.
Yeah, and she
that's-
becomes Ninlil. Yeah.
That's where they bring in Zu. Ninurta battles the god Zu for leadership of Earth after Zu stole Enlil's powers.
The Enlil ship.
Yeah. Well,
So
like he.
let's dial back a little bit. So there's a little bit of historical tying with the scepter, the tiara,
The tablets.
and the crook. Where those were elements tied to iconography throughout our ancient past, and are even relics today of the tiara and scepter being
yeah.
applied to like kings for countries to still have them, which Sitchin did bring up. What was the point? Beer's starting to win.
I mean, those were essentially like the. I was gonna say symbols of power, but like the way he writes it is that these were actually.
All right, but so the symbols of power.
These were actually.
Sitchin later writes about
objects
how like they're actually
of
you know
godhood or whatever.
essentially imbued with power of the Enlil ship, and Enlil is translated as, according to Sitchin, as Lord. So kind of like the lordship powers over the pantheon are tied to these objects,
Right.
and
Not necessarily.
Zu is able to steal them from Enki, I think it was.
Yes.
When Enki went for like a swim or whatever.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he just like
He just
ganked
goes
him
and
off the
takes
side
him
of the
up.
riverbank or whatever,
Yeah.
all sketchy
and
as shit.
fucks off. He fucks off
And
to
then
like
he
a
fucked
cave or
off in
something,
his, like,
and all of a sudden
his
he's the king.
Worship.
Yeah, they're mine now. I'm gonna go hide somewhere. Worship me. What?
So then the problem comes like how to get back the objects of the Enlil ship. And so they convince Ninurta to go fight him. So Ninurta gets his own little sky ship and apparently is imbued with weapons of light. And he and Zu have a battle.
He destroys Zu's wings.
The wings, which people think like maybe like bird-like thing or whatever, but Sitchin's arguing that they're in like basically like fighter jets.
Yeah. He infers Zu and Ninurta had flying machines. And sort of
Like a helicopter
Ninurta
was sighted at
defeated
one
Zu
point.
with a
Yeah.
missile. Sitchin wonders if Zu could be Enki's son. That's where he makes a parallel to Babylonian mythology and thinking that Zu is Marduk. And then, like within that same paragraph, like he disproves that, saying that Zu, he believes that Zu was Nanar, Sin,
Right.
completely other fucking person.
Well,
a legitimate
because
son of
he had this
Anu
like he does
and
like this fun linguistic tracking through
And
there
Anu.
because he was like, oh, another name for like Nanar was like Enzu or whatever. And,
Right,
like,
yeah.
Zu
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
it was like Lord Zu was who like Nanar may have been. And I see Ray Polifman open his book, and
I was looking for my tabs because like I
I'm just
specifically
looking for-
set that out
but
for
it's a cool fucking like exchange or whatever. Of,
Enzu. Fuck. 'Cause he mentions that in chapter 2. Fuck. Where are you, you bitch? Ball sacks. Oh, it's a huge mess.
Where do we leave off?
No, we're
Oh, you guys try to look up the Suen Enzu thing, I think.
yeah. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in my fucking.
I know
book
I
here.
had that because I know I did. Fuck. I'll
So
probably have
anyway,
to leave
like,
off. Yeah,
despite
go ahead.
all this like God's fuckery bullshit, there are, and so I think an important thing to bring up about Sitchin is that even though the Greeks and Romans talked about, Zeus and Aphrodite and all the
Right.
other dudes, and then the Egyptians had Osiris and Ra, yada yada yada, that not only did the Sumerians have these gods fucking existed. And these gods weren't gods, they were just fucking aliens.
Right.
So that's one thing to keep in mind this whole time, that like he traced it all back down. Then he's like, but they're aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, this particular figure was so and so with like wearing a helmet and goggles. Like, not so sure, buddy.
And I believe
Right.
it's in chapter 4, maybe chapter 5, where he talks about some of the iconography, like the stelas and bas reliefs of Ishtar. Or
I think
Inanna,
I
Right,
think that comes-
wearing,
I
like
think that
the
comes to chapter
goggles
5,
and the implement of like space
Right.
flight or
She
whatever.
was wearing like a harness
Right.
with was essentially like a flying, well, like a jetpack almost, but like they
Yeah.
like they explained them as like
I mean, so you want to move on to chapter 5?
Well, I think we're still on 4, kind of.
I mean,
Because
as far as
the point of
we're
it is that
mostly-
like these dudes are actually like fucking aliens, and they
Right.
are deciding to fuck with Earth, and this is still like pre-humans, even though
yeah,
in this chapter it was discussed how the first human, fucking Ea tried to get up to go talk to Anu, and the dude pussed out when
Right.
he actually talked to Anu. That's brought up, but the whole thing is like humans aren't even in play. I don't even know why
No.
he brought up that story in this chapter,
yeah.
because it's still about fucking the ancient gods.
This is the drama going on between the gods themselves prior
yeah,
to
and
like
so
humans coming into play.
Sitchin bring up like Adapa, that was stupid at that point. He could
Yeah.
have brought up later, like
Right. And I mean,
but these gods have affairs. They fucking fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're very human-like,
and that's explained.
They eat,
yeah.
they drink, they fuck.
and we have to say that he's getting this primarily from the Sumerian tablets,
Yep.
right? Again, this is not something that. Again, this is his translation of the tablets. This isn't like necessarily Daniel Roland.
Oh,
There's one thing I wasn't like too clear on, was that he's getting these from the tablets, but what are the scholars saying regarding these tablets? Are they in agreement with him when it comes to these?
I mean, they're the ones
stories
he's
that
pulling this
he's-
information from.
Well,
Well, yeah.
one thing I did read is that scholars still aren't really clear as everything that the Sumerians were talking about.
Okay,
So it's like back
Yeah.
in 76, Sitchin has this like perfect knowledge of Sumerian, writing and shit.
well, that's
And-
what I'm trying to get at, is that the fact that he's making assumptions whenever
And-
he's reading these tablets, or like translating these tablets.
but I've already mentioned earlier how it makes these leaps of
Yeah, absolutely.
logic,
yeah.
Well, it must be rocket ships, and we'll get
Right.
into chapter 5, we'll get into this for sure. And I really like his explanation, but that's just me, hoping UFOs come get me.
Save us.
Or just test us.
Fuck that. Burn the planet. See who survives.
But yeah, so I just find it funny that he just has this like perfect knowledge when we still don't know a lot about these cultures.
Right.
That he's espousing all this shit
Yeah,
about.
because
Makes some very bold
he's making a lot of bold claims when it comes to his interpretations and translations of the tablets.
And speaking of the translations, there was something that came up in chapter 2 when he was talking about the Archaeomenids with Cyrus the Great in Persia. And talking about that empire. He has this shit where
I can't find it.
He invokes the translation of
The wise.
Yeah, the wise one or whatever. But that term is actually multivalent. It means all sorts of stuff. Like some of them do have like kind of like that, like wise or smart or clever or like master of like connotation. But the Archaeomenids fucking empire, it just meant gotta pull on my little notebook 1 second.
I can't find it.
It translated to of the family of the Archaeomenids. And Archaeomenids may not have even existed. He may just be like a fictive kin member that people tie their, allegiance to or whatever. Like, and shortly after in that same paragraph, Sitchin's talking about Hak Amanish. And all that means, it's Old Persian for Archaeomenid, or however it's fucking pronounced, Archaeomenid, whatever. So it's just like he's doing all these like linguistic ties trying to make this case, but there's multiple like interpretations of the text. So once again, he's just kind of like cherry picking, and he did like in the prologue about like, this is an interpretation, even though he's like trying to present it as like, the end all be all to what happened. And I just think it's funny. Because it's very basic, historiography and archaeology totally disagrees with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so admittedly, a lot of the history and archaeology he brings up, like it's out of my wheelhouse. I mean, I took a course in Egyptian archaeology, but mostly I studied the Americas.
Right on.
So a lot of this stuff was kind of like new to me as well. Like I have, read stuff like David Icke, who traces, the Ishtar figure for his own intents and purposes. So I kind of know a little bit about that, but I really don't know shit about fucking, the site of Ur or whatever.
Same here.
Which was a place.
Just like things that I read, like out of.
So a bit of this, I'm kind of like almost proxying in my knowledge of other areas of the world. Because I did take a bunch of classes like Orders of Agriculture and stuff that talk about all this like stuff that, of course, was found out after Sitchin finished his fucking book.
Right.
So
a bit.
I've tried hard to fight my need to just do like, oh wait, this and this and this and this. Oh wait, that happened in 1995.
Yeah.
So I wonder, Sitchin on his deathbed, if he thought how wrong he was potentially. Or if he believed it after, like, if he like kept up on the literature and stuff, and
Right.
gone like, wait a minute, there's all these other domestication events worldwide, all this other mound building, super early other places. Fuck, you know.
Well, I mean, I think I'll go through. I'll check that out for the next episode, whenever we do get to that. But do y'all want to move on to chapter 5? Are you all good with that?
I'm fine.
No, absolutely, yeah.
This
Just
was-
Okay.
I'm just glad we get through this clusterfuck of a chapter.
All right. So last chapter, chapter 5, the Nephilim, people of the fiery rockets. And before we get into that, I just want to give a definition of the Nephilim for those of you who don't know
Maybe
what that is.
unawares.
Yeah, you're not aware. The Nephilim are referenced in the Bible. I don't recall which book, but it's they're referred to as the sons of God, who came down from heaven and mated with the women
Yep.
of Earth.
The men?
And they created.
yeah, of course, it's like this like colonial like approach. Like you don't have like women coming down fucking, you know, human dudes.
Yeah,
Nope, they're all dudes.
I have to.
We have a masculine god.
I have to correct myself. The Nephilim aren't the persons that came
Only wieners
down
here, folks.
and mated. The Nephilim are the result of the sons of God coming down and mating with human women and creating the Nephilim, which are quote unquote the giants
Yes.
of
Yeah.
which
Half
of the
human,
Bible.
half
So
divine.
and they go into more detail of the Nephilim in the Book of Enoch. If you haven't come across that, that is a book of the Apocrypha. You can find various translations regarding that book at your local bookstore or your Amazon.
Yeah.
Just hit up a Catholic
product.
church. Just email them. Just be like,
Yeah,
yeah, can I get an apocrypha?
Oh yeah, I should have
And
been
actually, so on that note, remember how I was going to like try to go to churches to just get copies of Bibles
Right,
for
right,
free,
yeah.
see how many I can rack up? I'm just going to start emailing people
Dude, do it.
and just see if I can get a fucking, you know, a throne of nonsense
blocked.
to rest upon that's
Well,
more comfortable than this chair.
The only Bibles I own currently are
Gideon?
NIVs, so which are New International Versions,
Hey.
and those versions are. I'm sorry if you own one.
They're
and
so
that's-
dumbed down.
Yeah, I was gonna say
God made you. God love you. You made God mad.
Daniel,
flush
you
you down
didn't let me
toilet.
give my apology before saying these things. Is that the New International
Well,
version of the
'cause I'm
Bible
not
or the
apologizing
very
for my
much
take
dumbed
on
down
it.
version of the Bible? You want the King James version, which is probably the closest you can get to like I guess a translation of the original texts, and that it could be Greek, Roman, Hebrew, whatever. That's probably the closest translation you can get from those. But the New International Version, again, there's multiple versions that are even dumbered down.
Jesus sat hill. Wonder why you not have food.
Jesus make fish.
Jesus make bread. He gives
Jesus
to
make
many
fish.
people.
People happy. People learn fish.
People are full.
People nap. Jesus talk.
People die. Jesus make live. Okay, I
Believe or burn. Believe
I
or
wanna-
burn. And that's like the last half of the book. They just
Yeah.
gotta fill out the pages, you know.
I just want to say, I mean, I apologize for those of you who do own those copies of the Bible, but if you really want to get into the meat and more, I guess, authentic versions of the Bible that you would like to read, you will need to go to the King James version and maybe study a little bit more to understand the way those are presented. The translations themselves kind of get a little muddy as far as like word choices and the way they present the information, because they could literally mean many different things whenever you go from the King James to the New International
Yeah,
Version.
and actually, that is fascinating. Just those word choices among the Bible, or versions of the Bible.
Right.
Like, sometimes though, I do have to kind of bitch about the New King James because just like we're not in fucking 13th century England, you know, and those dudes didn't even talk like that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, again, I will say it's the closest translation that you can get from the original versions of those books. It's the closest.
unless you make a time traveling device.
Yeah, of course.
And go back before the Council of Nicaea, which was in 1534, I believe.
Somewhere around
where
there.
they heavily edited the shit out of the Bible.
Yeah.
That's when they cut out the Apocrypha, where the Book of Enoch is
Yeah,
in.
right, yeah.
But somehow the Catholic Church adopted the Apocrypha too, which is intriguing.
I don't know if they
because like
there's a few books in
unofficially.
the quote unquote Catholic Bible that incorporate some of the books from the Apocrypha. Not all of them, but some of them.
right.
And
But I believe Enoch is one of them.
no, I don't think Enoch is not one of them. No, that one, the Book of Enoch is a completely separate book from.
Because I figured that one would like
those.
kind of jive with the overall, let's kind of reify the Jacob's Ladder story.
Well, from my understanding, that the Book of Enoch kind of gives, I want to say, a bit more freedom to the congregation to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So I mean, as if you're the Catholic Church, you don't want that. Like you need people to submit.
The funniest thing that I think about, like why certain books of the Bible were allegedly like cut out of it, was because they couldn't really verify like the source.
Well, I mean,
And it's like
technically,
it's like, bitch, this shit was written like 300 years after the fact.
Well, I mean,
That may have happened.
Well,
fuck all y'all.
And I would say,
It was
Daniel,
more
like
like a
the Book of
propaganda.
Enoch probably didn't jive with the consistency of the
Because like
the Godhead person and the common folk.
No,
so you need
it was all about
you
control.
also need that middleman.
it's funny because like even in the edited New Testament, or Old Testament, there's shit about like gods and like multiple, and then it gets like kind of explained away in the New Testament, like, oh no, that's just like the Trinity or whatever. But you have to wonder about like these linkages with the initial intent of the Old Testament as tied to these earlier narratives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Bible is
It's a mind fuck, man.
it's a crazy book. I mean, like I suggest you read it.
good luck.
Read the book. I mean, like, don't just take someone else's word for it. Read your Bible. Read it. If you have it in your
I would
house.
actually love to do like a Bible as lit class at the university level. Let's just get down nitty gritty. Part 1, part
look,
2, part 15.
yeah,
Let's just do it, man.
The Bible is an interesting book as a whole, and I feel like most people don't dive in
No.
deeply enough to like really absorb the information that's in there, because I mean, the Bible is
Because Jesus loves you.
Yeah, that was going to be my final statement right there.
Let's jump to the action chapters, Revelations, baby.
I'm just gonna say this: read your Bible, all right? You haven't read it, okay? And like, don't just let it sit there and collect dust. Read your Bible, all right? Okay, chapter 5, the Nephilim, the people of the fiery rockets.
Yeah. So Sitchin starts going into the technology of the
technology.
ancients.
Well, it's continuing with kind of the bickerings of the gods and their maneuverings and so forth. And one thing that I think is interesting, and we're going to jump towards the end of the book, but like, the Anunnaki create man because they're too lazy to do their own jobs.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But say the gods are still around, right?
Work smarter, not harder, Daniel.
If the gods left shortly after mankind was like around, why is there such a ubiquity of representations of the rocket ship Shems that he talks about?
Yeah.
In their language and stuff, like even though it's imparted by the gods or whatever, but say it wasn't, because it says like, oh, they just made man to do their shit for them.
Yeah,
Doesn't imply they actually taught them anything apart from just
that's true.
the basic production
Yeah,
stuff,
like,
which is like
very basic,
mine gold, you know.
very basic manufacturing type of tasks to kind of get the job done. You did bring up Shem in this chapter. Sitchin refers to Shem as almost like a rocket, and he refers to like the Tower of Babel from the Bible, where men
As
were
a Shem, yeah.
men were trying to build this whole.
Tower to the
he
gods
said
to
like
heaven.
tower to the gods, or like almost like a landing strip.
Yeah.
Well, this
to the
was
gods.
another like crazy leap of like linguistics that he makes for his argument. So he does talk about the biblical story of the Tower of Babel and a few other instances where the word Shem has been interpreted as making a name for oneself or one's namesake, you know, something of that accord. Like I would say, like, you know, put your name on the side of a building. That's a Shem.
Right.
But then Sitchin goes, but if we think of Shem as a rocket ship,
Yeah.
and he makes like a little bullshit case for it. It's like the whole thing changes. So apparently the people of Babel were trying to make a fucking rocket ship.
Yeah.
And the aliens were like, nah, you dudes shouldn't be traveling to space. And that's why they blew up everything. Yeah. Like that's the literal argument that Sitchin makes.
Yeah,
And it's
all the
fucking
languages.
hilarious.
Temples were landing pads.
The fact, Daniel, you said it correctly. Is that Sitchin is saying that imagine that Shem is a fucking rocket ship, right? And he's
And he tries to tie it to linguistics. He's
Yeah.
like, well, look at these characters.
Translating the word
Doesn't that
Shem.
look like a modern spaceship? This is the command module. These are the rockets. This is the bit that comes off and blows up in the atmosphere.
Shem
You know,
is a
like,
flying machine.
again, when I was going through this chapter earlier today, and that part came up, I was like you can you just, is that like one of the biggest leaps you can make regarding the word choice, or the, again, linguistic deciphering of this this language? Or because that is a huge assumption to make, that the Shem is a rocket ship.
Yeah, he reinterprets it.
Yeah, he pretty much just like makes it to fit his
Gilgamesh flies on a rocket to his goes to a spaceport guarded by fucking death rays, and he retrieves
he meets one of his ancestors.
That's right. Yeah, on the quest for immortality.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
We can't. I mean, we can say for sure that Sitchin does make a bunch of leaps and bounds whenever it fits his narrative, because
He has to.
Yeah, he has to, because if you're going to take the scholarly interpretation of some of these,
No, yeah, slow and steady wins the race as far as any of those go. Like you don't make these kinds of statements in academia at all. They will fuck you.
well, again, that would that's because he's an independent researcher and he can make these claims. And what scholarly person is going to take the time to, like, if they read this, they're going to be
Because
like,
they know
this is fucking
better.
nonsense. I'm not going to fucking bother with this.
No, like you can make
They're not
whatever
gonna take
claims
the
you want,
time
but when you
to,
want to go,
Facebook itself, this one novel, if it was written by a scholar, it'd be twice as long.
Yeah.
Just for all the times they have to write this would suggest
To
that.
prove. Exactly. Yeah.
And you know,
record indicates
Daniel,
a possible.
that's the one thing I wish he would have done, is that this would suggest, like, it's not making the
absolutely
claim,
not.
it's suggesting
Yeah.
maybe this is
Never.
the case.
Maybe.
No.
Yeah.
Like,
And he's not saying that. He's saying this is
he is
not even like this
he's
is what it is.
definitively
He's like saying,
stating-
what if you just turn this into this?
Just listen to what I have to say.
Yeah. Turn this word into rocket ship, and this like fits everything that I'm saying
Yeah.
right here and now. So
Take that
I don't
bitch
know.
to space.
And we're just on chapter 5 right now.
Yeah.
There are there are 15 fucking chapters
guys,
in this book.
It gets crazier, and what's fucking hilarious is that, like, Sitchin, it's not clear whether people or the Anunnaki build all these sites for the holding of the Shem, because they describe, these elaborate, mounds being made, but there's an inner chamber where the Shem hangs out. And it's like a fucking launching bay for a
Yeah.
fucking missile. And he does another like linguistic leap where he assumes that over 5,000 years of language development, that Tet in Sumerian is the same as Tet in modern day Hebrew, which means missile, which he ties to some of the iconography. He's like, didn't know if you can missile? Well, a missile is a lot different than a fucking rocket ship, bud.
I'm just thinking of all the paintings and drawings of the Tower of Babel, and like it's showing like the actual tower going up to heaven. You just need to change that, put a point on the top, and you got a
Yep.
fucking rocket ship.
Put a couple boosters on the side, a couple fins. It's a
He is very specific. It is a multi-stage rocket with an engine, supply
You mean
chamber,
like
and capsule.
multi-storied, as in a tower.
Which
Right.
okay, so about this, so
I mean,
it
no.
ties all of this iconography to like our spaceships.
Oh, yeah.
But if the fucking Anunnaki were traveling in space with our technology,
They'd obviously be using ion engines.
they would get to their moon and stop, just like we did over the last 40 years.
The one thing I was thinking about whenever I was listening to this book and reading it is that like how I guess primitive he's claiming that they have like rocket ships.
I mean,
because how could that, like you said, Daniel, it could only get to their moon. How could that get any further than what I mean?
Yeah,
the modern
like,
modern day UFO like allegedly has like anti-gravity type of capabilities and,
also,
almost like the ability to bend space and time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
With the exception of
They exist
the
in
wonderful
parallel universes.
like statue of Ishtar or Inanna that Sitchin shared in the book.
Same thing.
Why is every other representation look like trash? Like they're all like a third grader doing an Etch-a-Sketch is making these fucking images, and he's like, well, that's a rocket ship. That's a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't fucking get it, man. And
He
they're
makes
like,
some big
who's
jumps.
recording this? Because if the aliens fucked off, then like how
It's
do
because-
people like know all these stories about them?
They obviously did not have Photoshop, right? So they couldn't fucking draw this shit as good as you would expect.
But then also you have these beautiful like bas reliefs of hunting scenes and like fucking animals and shit.
Full body figures.
And then you have just like little
absolutely.
like Etch-a-Sketch like gods and rocket ships.
You get what you pay for,
and like
I don't know.
shoes.
They must have had like a, they had like the guys that work for like $5 an hour and the other guys that work for like $100 an hour.
Well, those are the humans, man. Like they have to get the humans to do the fucking bitch work.
Like it's obviously.
But then why educate humans as to like what was going on? Because then wouldn't the humans somehow figure a way like, wait a minute, some of these Anunnaki are half us. Maybe
Yeah.
they bleed too.
Well,
And maybe that's why the Anunnaki fucked off, because they're like, dude, they're going to kill us once they figure out the scam. Like,
well, I mean, I guess we'll get into deeper into that whenever.
we definitely will,
Yeah,
but,
whenever, into the book. Yeah.
but even in chapter 4, I mean, there's this whole, like 2 pages that Sitchin devotes to talking about how sin, left and came back.
Right.
And then he gets into the rocket speech rocket speak in chapter 5. And it's so fucking ridiculous. Because wouldn't you think that they would have because the fucking Renaissance era paintings that have the flying saucers in the background,
Exactly. Yeah.
those to me have way more fucking or way longer legs to run on
unless
than these little shitty little look, it's a rocket ship.
unless
These
the
weird little
It's a helicopter.
unless the Anunnaki are giving the humans at the time a very primitive version to think that they could actually travel outside of their atmosphere.
But why would the Anunnaki want to fuck up their fucking meal ticket, man?
Well, maybe just to give them the humans.
A little taste.
We all as human beings, as Homo sapiens, we all need a sense of importance. So they're giving us.
We don't know that. Maybe the Anunnaki gave us that as a mistake.
Yeah, maybe.
5 years later, they're like, fuck, man, this guy's starting to write shit down.
You go, which one of you motherfuckers gave him the ability to write? God damn it.
Who taught you Octagon?
Is there any other thoughts you want to give to chapter 5?
1 second. Let me flip through the book real quick. Oh, yes.
Okay.
One of the weakest links he does. He tries the eagle discussion, where he first starts talking about how the eagles were thought to be the various gods operating the vehicles. Then he's like, oh, well, maybe the eagle was actually the aircraft. And then we could tie that to our culture because the Apollo 11 mission, they said, the eagle has wings and the eagle has landed. And that is wasted 3 pages. And I'm going to put this page up to you guys, which our listeners can't see. But he's got all this fucking Sumerian bullshit on top of it. And then the Apollo patch they wore that just has a fucking eagle on the moon. It's fucking stupid as shit, man.
Figure 79.
I do not stand by those 2 couple pages whatsoever.
No.
What figure was that?
And then
79.
It's 79, yeah. And then next page, figures 80, 81, and 82 are fantastic fucking winged fucking dudes. I mean, it's right there on your screen.
What figure was that, Daniel?
82.
Initially it was 79 for the Apollo bullshit, but then figures 78 through 82 are ridiculous.
The Tower of Heaven to the left, the one who was launched.
So you can ask people what do these have in common? Oh, they're wings.
Yeah. You mean astronauts?
You mean those are flying spaceships?
Well, yes.
I just
yes.
Those of course have to be
symbolism.
ships that aren't ways that people say this is who we are. No. They're fucking rocket ships.
Fucking hell.
This fucking book, dudes, just fuck, man.
And we have to.
And the thing is, first read through, I was like, all right, cool, little fun little idea. Second read through, where I was really focusing on the astronomy stuff we'll get into, in the next. So I have to go through that again. Fuck. But going through this first 5 chapters again, it was fuck, man. Just so I, already had the main narrative in line, already had my second like kind of like grumbly ideas on it, and then third go through I was like critical as fuck. There's so many black marker marks in my fucking or black pen marks. It's like, well, why don't you cite this? Says who? Like just all this like real shitty flippant nonsense.
Well, all right. Roland, do you have any last thoughts here?
No, we pretty much went over everything.
All right.
It gets into some
How about you, Ray?
ridiculous bullshit.
I honestly, Daniel, I do not. The first 5 chapters, there was a lot to go through, and like I feel like we kind of touched on the general topics of each one.
Word.
But yeah, so I just want to say to anyone who's listening, if you've followed us all the way through the end,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Because
we're trying our best.
This is a very confusing fucking endeavor, and this is just the first 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Good
of
luck.
this
If you want to
15-chapter
read this,
saga.
prepare for a mind fuck and one hell of a goddamn migraine.
that is correct.
Making sense of this.
So do you guys want to go to ratings?
I do want to. Well, no, never mind.
No, what you got? Bring it on.
No. It
We're ready
has
for it.
nothing to do with the book necessarily. I'll just add that at the very beginning because I wanted to tag the whole follow us, blah blah blah, all that shit in the very beginning.
Oh,
Okay, so if you're with us to the chapter 5, we have
bitter end.
yeah, we have
This
2 more
first third of the book.
2 more episodes to go through, chapters 6 through 10, and then 11 through 15, and then we'll give our final thoughts on the book itself as a whole.
yeah.
This book was quite a feat to go through, and we had to break it up into 3 episodes because
It's very interesting.
there was no way, unless you wanted like a 10-hour episode on just one book. I don't think anybody could go through that.
So as disjointed as this episode was, dudes, our listeners, speaking of dudes, like that's who I'm referring to. The dudes. Not you dudes, but
Yeah,
You do.
you dudes.
you dudes,
right?
the listeners.
So
My dudes.
go ahead and listen to this baffled episode and just do a Google search or YouTube search of Anunnaki past or ancient aliens podcast, Sumeria bullshit.
There's plenty out there.
Every fucking program I reviewed has tried to take this book or this subject matter just head on, and
Failed miserably.
fuck, they're rough, man. Just and shout out to those dudes for
Trying.
helping guide me to think about ways to not do this episode and also ways to do this episode because some of you did do your homework or whatever, but some of your presentation was janky just because this topic is crazy tough to try to synthesize. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly if you guys, because most of you dudes will go out and just reference Sitchin, you're mostly talking about the Anunnaki writ large, and then that's a whole other can of worms that I didn't want to fuck with, and so maybe you guys can look down upon us because we decided to go about this piecemeal, and that's your right, but maybe we can collaborate, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, that's always interested in hearing what someone else has to think.
I just want to give the audience a bit of a history on this episode. Is that this episode was supposed to come out in July, and we have been stressing over this episode because we didn't want to present to you, the listener, just a general version or general idea of this book and the Anunnaki
This
and
isn't a
Zacharias
goddamn
Sitchin.
Amazon review.
And that's because, like Daniel said, we've gone through certain programs and we've listened to them and we've seen what they've done, and we want to give everyone or anyone who's listening a very detailed version of the book that we're reading here, and that is what Books of the Strange is. We want to go through the book in depth. Even if you choose not to read it, at least you can get the general information or the more in-depth information that we're presenting to you without having to read the book yourselves, because this book is fairly rough. But if you want to go back and check out Communion, that's a bit of an easier read, and that's why that's one episode. If you want to go through Michelle Remembers, that's also a fairly easy read.
Yep.
If you can get your hands on a copy of the book, good luck. But we should have a copy for you if you actually want to dive into this. We have a free copy that we are willing to give out, but we'll do that at the very ending of episode 3, which whenever we finish this book. Any other thoughts?
No.
Okay, so
God damn, I'm just
the 1 through 5. Jesus Christ.
yeah, I was just 1 through 5, and the rest of this book just gets nuttier, and it's gonna be great. Yeah, and
Ready for the squirrel shit.
And don't worry, all you people that are like, what about this? What about that? Why don't you guys talk about this? We are going to be reviewing our audio actually before the next episode. And we're going to have a little bit of time to follow up on some points we may have missed or fucked up or whatever.
Right. We're trying to be as thorough with ourselves as possible.
Primer, you know, in the last episode. And then here's problems with it that we may have identified, and then new content.
Right on.
Just kind of tie all this together, because I mean, this is a new kind of way of doing it. You know, like this should have been one episode initially, but we're doing 3. But y'all have to deal with it. Sorry, guys. Or maybe, hooray, get more of us.
Yep.
All right. So, my name is Ray.
This is Roland.
And the Pacific Northwest Studios.
This is Daniel.
All right. We'll see you on volume 2 of Books of the Strange. Whoa, it's Books of the Strange, volume 3, part 2, part 1, part 2. We'll title it appropriately.
Yeah.
But we'll see you on the next episode, which we will continue. 12th Planet by Zachary Sitchin.
Strange, Books of the Strange. Zachary Sitchin's The 12th Planet, volume 1.
Yes.
Right.
And then
part 2 to be
you'll hear from us from volume 2. So.
Hey, it's ridiculous. I had some kind of a rectal probe. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.